So you want to learn how to script in Python in Modo and you don't know quite where to start? Well, then this should be a good introductory video. So right now I am in Modo's modeling viewport. When I go to the scripting tab, then I'm in my scripting layout, and over here we will start discussing how to script in Modo. Well, first you need to tell Modo you are working with Python. So you do that by hashtag and then Python. Now this is actually not necessary anymore. You do not have to include this when you are working in the Python editor in Modo itself, but it won't hurt. And then you need to import a module named Alex. And this module, here you will find a lot of methods and functions that you can use for scripting in Python in Modo. And again, this is not absolutely necessary in Modo 902, but again, it won't hurt. And now with having the methods and functions available of the Alex method, you could do a printout to the event log. And you do that by calling a method out, and you do that by alex.out. And then between parentheses, you can write a string, and I'm going to put between quotes, hello, Modo. And now when I click this icon up here, so it says run the script. Now you see in the event log, and the event log is a place that you are going to use a lot to be able to script in Modo and to check output messages like this. So this is a first script in Modo. You can also print out to the output window. So in the Python editor you have two sections, and as you see, you can resize them. You can make one visible, the other visible, both visible. This is the output window, this is the editor, and if I want to clear my output window, I can press the X icon here, and if I want to clear my event log, I can go to clear log, and if I choose master list, then everything will be cleared from the event log. And now when I execute this print statement, print, this string goes to the output window. This is actually a Python command method. It's not a modo method. So when I now execute this script, you see in the event log, hello modo from alex.out. And up here in the output window, this string goes to the output window. That's the string that has been printed from the output window. There are two alternative methods for interacting with Modo's internal commands. So underneath here I have my command history. If you don't see it, you can click and drag it to make it appear. And you have your undo history, your undos tab, your history tab, your commands tab, your scripts tab, and your results tab. This will become very important when you script in Modo. In the commands tab, I have done a filter search, and you can press this F icon. So if I uncheck it, I have all commands underneath all. So when I click all, then you have all commands, and you can do a filter search by clicking this icon, and then start typing in the name of the command. And I have typed in cmds.sa, and the result has been filtered to command cmds.savelist. This command lets you print out a text file with all Modo commands. And over here you see usage, cmds.savelist, and two arguments. And both of these arguments are between angle brackets, meaning they are optional. So they are arguments that you do not have to require, that you do not have to specify. Sorry about that. So for instance, when I click on simply left click on commands.savelist, it also gets added to the command entry underneath the command history. When I click in that viewport and press enter, then you get a pop-up to save your file. So I'm going to, for instance, go to D and just leave it as untitled.txt and save it. So now when I go to my D drive, you have untitled.txt. When I open that one, you see that you have now a list with all commands that you can use with modo. So going back to modo, now I have created that list with the command entry, but you can also do that through a script. And then this notation is very important. So as I said earlier, there are two alternative methods for interacting with modo's internal commands. And that actually means that you can, and if I deselect it, it will become more readable. I can actually, when I write commands in a script, I can actually include filename colon and verbose colon. That's the first method, and I will show you later. And the other method is without the filename colon and without the verbose colon. So what does that mean? Well, let me first show you with the filename colon. So in order to execute a command in modo, I have to call a function of the LX module called lx.eval, and then open and closing parentheses, and that method takes a string, so I need to add quotes, and now I have to specify the command, and the command is cmds.save list. And now if I execute that command like that, it will be like having it put in the command entry. So when I run that code, I will get my pop-up. And I also had an error because probably I did cancel and the code does not provide what to do when you cancel. But that's not the point of this tutorial. So the first method is with including the attribute names. So command.savelist and then file name colon, and then I have to provide the path and the name of my file. So I'm going to do d colon backslash of, I think it's slash, and then untitled, and I'm going to.txt, and verbose arguments I'm going to write verbose colon 0, and 0 means that it's false, so no extra information will be added. So when I now run my script, it should be okay. When you go to your results tab, you should see commands.savelist the untitled text success, and it's actually not that success, so it's not been recorded in the results tab. It only says in history script editor run script, but let me check my drive. I should have an untitled tooltext. Yes, here it is, and that's exactly the same list, but now I have created and saved that list through a script in modo with Python. The second notation, and I'm just going to copy and paste it, Shift Control C, go to the end, Control V. The second notation is without these attribute names, so just delete filename colon and delete verbose colon. I'm going to call this one 3, and I don't need this. When I have put my cursor by left clicking on that line and press Control/key on the numpad, Control/, then it gets commented out. And now of course only this code will be executed, so I'm going to clear the event log, clear my output window and run my code. argument parsing. Command does not have an argument named D. Okay, I made a error with the string, so this needs to be in double quotes. So when you have special characters in your string, it's already is a string with the simple quotes and with single quotes, and now this part needs to be in double quotes. So now when I run my script, okay, so when I go to my D drive, I should have, yep, there it is, untitled 3, and you see again my list, that commands.save list command has been executed by the eval function of the LX module, and you can, like here, and when you go back to that line and press Ctrl/ and you uncomment it, so you can write it like this: file name colon and then your text, or, and note that here you didn't need the double quotes, and verbose colon 0. In this notation is much shorter, will save you a lot of typing, and as we'll see in the next part, it will also be very interesting for using the percent operator, but that is something I will show you later. And I can also run this code, of course, Ctrl+C to copy, Ctrl+V to paste, with a value to 1 or true, and I'm going to uncomment this, Ctrl/ to uncomment that. Now I'm going to create a fourth one, so untitled 4.txt, and my verbose argument, which is a boolean, has now been set to 1, and let's see what that does. So okay, now I should have a fourth one, and here it is, untitled 4.text, and now you see on the right side you have extra information about all the commands in modo. So see, for the apptastic.mirrorWeights you have your usage, and then yeah, there's no more help over here. So for instance, for this one, create assembly group, creates an assembly group, and so on. So for all commands, if you set verbose to 1, then you have extra information. With the previous one, the verbose was 0, or if it's by default it's 0, then you do not have those extra information. So this concludes this part. So here's a more practical example. In the previous part I talked about the percent operator, and let me first execute this script. So I'm running the script, and you see now in the event log output, tell me why I don't like Mondays. So how did that string got there? Well, first I'm declaring a string variable, and I'm giving it, so string replace, and I'm giving it the string value Mondays. And then I'm declaring another string named string complete, and this time the string is this notation, so single quote %s space me space, again %s space I don't, and with an escape character, because this is a single quote for don't, but if I don't add that escape character, it will be interpreted as the end of the string, and I don't want this to be interpreted as a special character. So don /quote t space like space, again %s exclamation mark, end of the string, and every %s sign in this string will now be replaced with whatever is after the string. So string and then parentheses and then quote tell, and this will be the first replacement for the %s. Then the string y, this will be the second replacement for the string s, and then the value of string will replace, which is a string with the value Mondays, will be substituted in the third %s. So this is actually about Python. This is not specific to modo. So then when I do an ls out of string complete, it says in the event log, tell me why I don't like Mondays. So these percentage operators are particularly useful, and you can use them with the second method that I discussed in the previous part. So when I run the code like I have done, then with the next code you get parentheses 1, 2, 3, 4. So how did that get there? Well, I'm actually querying the layer service, and that is done with this line. So this layers equals the result of an ls eval function, and between parentheses and as a string, so between quotes, query space layer service space layers space question space all. So this is a string, which is a modo command in a string, and as a string it gets evaluated by the function eval, which is of the ls module, and the value that is being returned is being put in a variable called list layers. And list layers is actually a tuple, since you cannot change the value of this array. So if I were to write code to assign a different value to one of these indices, that will not succeed. And the actual values in here, they are indices of the mesh item layers of the scene. When this tuple did get printed by the ls out, and between parentheses the name of that tuple. So ls out list layers prints out between parentheses 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And these indices, they in turn can be used as attributes to other query commands to get specific information about specific layers. So for instance, if you wanted to get the names of the layers, then you could write a for loop. So for num loop, and this is a variable that I'm going to create with this statement in list layers. So in this list that has been returned for num loop in list layers, then a new variable name, layer name equals, and again an eval function of the ls module, and again between parentheses and between quotes, query layer service, layer.name, question mark, %s, and as we've seen before with the percent operator, the %s will get the value of this part, and so percent, and this time it will be the value of num loop. So the first time it will be 1, the second time it will be 2, the third time 3, and the fourth time 4. So this will be substituted each time with the value of that tuple, and then I do a printout of ls.out, and then a string name of mesh layer, then the value of num loop, and then again a string equals, and then the value of layer name, which is this variable which is getting in the for loop each time the value of the which is the result of the query layer service layer.name, and the first time this will be 1, the second time 2, and so on. And so each time it prints out name of mesh layer, then 1 equals mesh, then 2 equals mesh 2, then 3 equals mesh 3, and 4 it equals mesh 4. So this is a practical example, and in this video I will not go further into actual scripting. This is just an example. I will create other videos about layer service because it's actually not that straightforward to use, but the important part to note is that the eval function takes a string, and it's a string notation of the actual modo command, and it is in the form of a query. And how exactly you do query modo commands and what that is all about, that is something that I explain in other videos. So this concludes this section. On a side note, before I go to the eval1 and eval_n functions, I wanted to add for the previous section that the index value, and these are the indices that were returned, 1, 2, 3, and 4, because there are 4 mesh item layers in the item list. So that these values, these index values, as well as the mesh layer name, so mesh 4, mesh 3, mesh 2, as the mesh layers IDs, they all can be used as input attributes to identify a particular layer for the queries. So I've added a bit of code, so when I clear everything, and by the way, I have a button clear log. This does the same as going to this clear log and clearing the master list. So I have a bit of code that I've added. It's the same, actually almost the same as the previous for loop. So here we queried the layer name, but here we are querying layer ID. So when I run the code, it outputs the layer IDs, and it's mesh 002, mesh 021, mesh 022, and mesh 023. So these are the IDs of these mesh layers. And as an example, underneath, I have written several different notations of how you can get to that. So you can do it with this notation and a %s, so string replacement, and mesh 4, which is the mesh item layer name, the external name, if you will. Then I declare a string variable and call it mesh 4, and again with string replacement, and this time instead of specifying the string mesh 4, as I'm putting the variable here, and again this contains that value mesh 4, so that will be replaced. So this output will be exactly the same as the previous one. And instead of using a percentage operator, I can of course specify the name directly into the string. Or I can do it by index value. For instance, I declare a variable and I assign it the value 4 in this case. Of course, this is hard coded. You could do something like that more dynamically in your code. But this is just an example. So in this case, again, a percentage operator. So var a equals 4, and this value will be substituted by %s. So again, so this time it's not by name but by index, because %s now will be 4 and not mesh 4. And that is exactly the same as if you were to put 4 directly into the string. And you can also do it with the ID itself, but of course in this case that would be, no, not stupid. I wanted to say a bit stupid, but it isn't. So you can do it with the ID itself. So mesh 023, if you put that directly into that, or you could also do that, of course, with the percentage operator. Then all of these do an output of mesh 023. So they all do the same thing. So to recap, the index, so in this case I've used as an example 4, and it's the 4th mesh layer in the tuple being returned. Or the mesh layer name, so the mesh layer name in the item list, or the internal layers ID, which you can get by querying layer service layer.id. All of those can be used as attributes to identify a particular layer for the queries. So that is something that I wanted to add. And now to the next section. A very important thing to be aware of when using the ls.eval function is that it can return none or one or a collection. So as we seen earlier, it returned a collection because I had several mesh items in my scene. In this scene, I only have one mesh item. So let me delete, for instance, this mesh item. I have only my camera and my directional light. When I run my code, then the first line, which is a query layer service, layer underscore groups, will give me a list of keywords that I can use, like main, FG for foreground, BG for background, all for all, and foreground and background in long notation. So earlier we saw query layer service and then layers and then question mark and then the percentage operator for the, or without percentage operator for the mesh name, the internal name, the ID or the index, but you can also specify with layers a keyword like main or all or FG for foreground or BG for background. Now there aren't any mesh layers, so my first alex.eval will return none. And this section is actually about the difference between eval and eval1 and eval_n, and I'm going to go to my comments over here. So one thing to be aware of is that when using alex.eval is that it can return none. So over here we see none. It also can return one, and this will be if you have one mesh item in your scene. So I'm clicking in the viewport, pressing the N key. So now I have a mesh layer. When I run my code now, and I get an error, then what? Oh, I have a selection over here. So I will clear everything and run the code again. So you see now it says 1. And this is not a list. This is simply an integer. So we have to be aware of that when you use your functions. Because when you use alex.eval1 and you were to do something like a for loop, like in the previous example, when you only have one mesh item, you do not get a list back, you get an integer back of 1. So it can be none if there is no mesh layer. It can be 1 if in this instance there is one mesh layer, or if I add a couple of mesh items. I'm going to click to deselect here, clear that and run my code again. You see now my alex.eval returns 5. Because now there are 5 mesh layers, so it can return none if there are none, it can return 1 if there is 1, or it can return a tuple like we've seen earlier. And that is why there is also an alex.eval1 function, and when you use alex.eval1, it will always return or none or 1. It will never return a collection, even if there is a collection. So let me clear everything to make that and deselect that, run my code again. So now I have multiple meshes. You see that the alex.eval returns 5. The alex.out, alex.eval1 also returns 5. And the alex.n method, it always returns either none or a collection. So if there aren't any mesh items, it will return none. But even if there is only one mesh layer, it still will give you 1. So if I press Ctrl W to go back to my scene where there is only one mesh item, when I run that code, so it's the eval1 is the 5th one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I am 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry about that. No, it's my 3rd one, and my eval is my 3rd one over here. So it's 5 from starting from there. So you see, I have but one mesh layer, but my alex.eval_n returns this time a list. It only contains 1, but now this is a list. where this is an integer. This is something that you will encounter often, that you need to be aware of when using layer service, that you have several eval functions, and to recap, ls eval1 returns or none, or one, or many. The ls eval1 always returns or none, or one, even if there are multiple mesh items. And ls eval1 eval_n always returns either none or a collection, even if there are only one. And I did say it wrongly before, so even if there are multiple, then ls eval1 always returns or none or just one. So again, to recap, I press N for having more. So when I go to my ls eval1 and with my cursor on that line, Alt Shift Enter, you see it returned 5. It did not return a list of indices, it just returned 5 because that one is selected. If I deselect that one and again run that code with Alt Shift Enter and my cursor on that line to only execute the eval1 over there, it will still give me 5 because internally that one, the mesh 5, is still selected. A last important fact about layers and the layer service is the fact that the list that is being returned, the collection that is being returned with a function like eval_n and like eval and eval_n, sorry about that, always starts at 1. So let me run this script. So lxout.eval query layer service layers all returns a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you see it starts at 1. So the index 0 of that list, if you will, always starts with value 1. So if you are going to use that index in itself to specify in a for loop, for instance, then you can use notations like we've seen earlier in this video, but you can also do it in another way, and this is, for instance, that part of the code. So for x in range and then between parentheses 1, so start from 1, 2 num layers plus 1. So num layers is my query layer service layer.n all. So this returns me the collection, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is what's being assigned to num layers. And in earlier video, in the earlier part, we have seen that you can say for x in num layers, and then you don't have to specify that range. But in this case, for x in x range, you have to start from 1 and not from 0. And you have to add 1 to num layers, otherwise the last one will not be evaluated. So this can be also a bit confusing when you start out with layers in Modo. The fact that the first one always returns 1 if there isn't a return by none. So if there aren't any mesh layers, then none will be returned. But if a list is being returned, or if with eval1 there is only 1 that is being returned, but then of course you are not going to iterate. But if there is a collection that is being returned, it always starts from 1, and then you have seen in the previous part that you can use another notations like for x in num layers. That's my preferred one. You can also say for x in x range 1 and then to num layers plus 1, and then that will iterate fine through the collection. So all of this may be very confusing. It is something that you will have to experiment with and to study in the docs. I have already posted other videos, but I have created this one because I came across a post on the Foundry, a post by Gwynne from the Foundry, who told all this what I told you in this video, to explain to someone who started out scripting that this is a good starting point. And this also concludes the video. What I want to add to this is what I've said earlier, that in order to know about how you query modo commands, that is something that I have explained in another video about querying the command system. And you can also consult other videos that I have posted on YouTube that are more in depth already about scripting. And to add to the complexity, you have several services, not only layer service, you also have, for instance, scene service. Scene service is a service that supersedes layer service. So much of the functionality of layer service is being superseded by scene service. So in preference, you will use scene service. And if there is something you cannot do with scene service, then you will come to layer service. And to make it even more difficult, in the meantime, there is also a new API, and that new API that is a more Pythonic wrapper for doing things like I've discussed in this video. So a lot of this is something you can do in a more Pythonic way. So instead of having to pass strings, let me recap. In order to execute modo commands by passing strings like here into the alex.eval functions, you simply will write more Pythonic code, and that is done with a new API. That is something that you also will need to learn, and I also already have a video about that. So this concludes the intro into scripting in Modo. I hope you found it useful. Bye for now.